All right. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate the invitation to come here today. I was originally going to talk about a little bit of a different topic. I was going to talk about something called revert protection. Happy to chat with anyone about that offline if you happen to know what that is. But after having sort of watched the talks this morning, I thought it might be beneficial to give a little bit of a higher level talk. So what I'm going to talk about is MEV and how it relates to DeFi. And my goal here is to give a somewhat opinionated survey of the let me go ahead and launch into it. By the way, just for full disclosure, I'm a professor at Columbia University, but I'm also a research advisor at Paradigm, which is a large venture capital firm in the space, and also a research advisor for Uniswap Labs, who runs the largest decentralized exchanges in the space. Okay, so what is MEV? Hopefully most people know, but MEV is basically the value that can be unlocked by a block proposer that is able to control both the ordering and the ability to either censor or insert their own transactions. And this was sort of first identified in this sort of very influential paper, Flash Voice 2.0, by Phil Diane and co-authors. I'm going to be focusing on this MEV in the context of DeFi, and that's basically because that's where the vast majority of MEV is, right? And specifically MEV related to trading in DeFi. So again, if you go out and quantify MEV and try to measure it, almost all of it comes from financial applications, and especially trading on AMMs. So it's the most practically relevant form of MEV. It's in fact altered the structure of consensus algorithms, right? So for example, in the Ethereum world, we shifted from priority gas auctions to some kind of PBS that we have now, and we're going to see, Malesh is going to talk next about concentration in the builder market and so on. All of this is driven by MEV. Similarly, you can look at other blockchains. For example, the Avalanche blockchain, they had to change their consensus algorithm because of this type of MEV. So this is just super important practically. The spirit of what's going on is we have these sort of end users, be it someone who wants to trade, someone who wants to provide liquidity and so on, and value is being extracted from them and redirected to intermediaries in a quote-unquote MEV supply chain, be it the proposers, arbitrageurs or searchers, block builders, relays, wallets, etc. And sort of my kind of high-level mental model of social welfare in finance is that you're going to create welfare from gains from trade. If you have someone who or has some idiosyncratic value for an asset that's positive, and someone who has negative idiosyncratic value, and they trade, then there's a welfare gain. And so what you want to do is to maximize that. And to the extent you have these intermediaries who are charging and extracting fees in the middle, you're creating frictions from those types of gains to trade. And then there's downstream welfare losses, right? So this type of MEV reduces overall social welfare. When these issues first started coming up, there were some discussions in the space, like maybe there's good MEV, maybe there's bad MEV, so on and so forth. I think there's no such thing as good MEV. All MEV is bad MEV, and certainly the type of MEV that I'm going to talk about is negative, right? So let me drill down into sort of what I mean by this. Again, the number one source of MEV within overall is DeFi trading, and within DeFi trading is this what I'll call sniping MEV, or sometimes people call it DEX-X ARB or loss versus rebalancing or so forth. The idea here is we have some kind of market structure on chain, like an automated market maker, and the prices in that market structure are static. They only change when there are trades, and maybe over time they become stale as prices on other venues change, and information comes out in the real world, and so on. And when the prices become stale, they're exploited by agents, which I'll call arbitrageurs, who have a better knowledge of the price, right? Because maybe they see the price on Binance or on the CME or whatever. So these are what we would call informed traders. And they come in and they trade against the pool to make money because, for example, maybe the price on the pool is too low. They can buy on the pool cheaper than what the asset is worth elsewhere. And when they make money, that translates into loss for the liquidity providers because short-term trading is a zero-sum game between the traders and liquidity providers. There's analogous types of issues in TradFi related to high-frequency trading. There's different flavors of this. You could have inconsistent prices in an AMM versus, let's say, centralized exchanges like Binance, so DEX-SEX arbitrage. You could have inconsistent prices on an AMM versus other AMMs. But more generally, what I'm talking about here is inconsistent prices between this stale mechanism on-chain and some kind of credible public value of what the asset is. But again, just for a mental model, we can imagine that to be, let's say, something like the Binance price. And to be clear, these arbitrageurs are providing a service, right? And this is, to sort of make the counter argument. People sometimes say this MEV is good because what the arbitrageurs are doing is correcting prices. And I would absolutely acknowledge that they are providing a service. However, it should be very cheap because this is a very obvious kind of trade to do, just to look at the price on Uniswap AMM and compare it to a price on Binance, right? So yes, they're providing a service, but in a competitive market, we should essentially be paying something close to zero for the service that anyone can do. So how does this work out? How much does this cost if you sort of build a model for it? Well, that's been a part of my research agenda, this idea of a loss versus rebalancing. Here, this is a framework to quantify how much you lose to arbitrageurs with access to a credible public signal for what the asset is worth. And I'm obviously not going to go into the details of this in a short talk, but the spirit here is to apply sort of standard continuous time finance tools like the Black-Scholes model in order to evaluate the value of this type of arbitrage and to sort of understand how much it is worth in terms of parameters like, for example, how volatile is the asset, what is the block time of the particular blockchain, what are the fees that the pool is charging, and so on and so forth. And again, I'm not going to parse these formulas, but what you get is sort of formulas like that. And when you think about the implications here, the top expressing arbitrage profits per unit time as relating to the square root of the block time. Of course, each block lasts an amount of time, delta t also, so I can write down the arbitrage profits per block according to the second formula. And what you can see is that the arbitrage profits per block are superlinear. Right, the longer and longer the block is, the more and more valuable arbitrage is over that block. And the corollary of that is to go the other way. To the extent that we can have faster blocks, that will actually be one way to mitigate this type of arbitrage. And the intuition is having faster blocks creates more competition between arbitrageurs and whittles away at their profits, which are also the losses to LPs. Now, let me make that argument a little bit crisply. Imagine you were just one arbitrageur. Right? And imagine that there's a price deviation of the pool from, like, let's say the Binance price that just sort of marginally exceeds the fee boundary, so you could make a little bit of money trading, right? If you're just a monopolist arbitrager, you actually shouldn't do that. You should pause for a second, right? And the reason you should pause is because if the price drifts further, you'll make even more. But if the price goes the other way, you'll never make less than zero because you can simply not do the arbitrage trade, right? So there's a certain amount of convexity. And so, again, if there's a small price deviation and a small profit you should make, you should actually hold off. But that's if you're a monopolist. In a competitive market, you can't hold off because if there's $1 on the floor, even though in a minute there might be $2, if I leave that dollar there, Near is going to pick it up. Right? But what happens when you have long block times is the block time is essentially creating a friction which is preventing the arbitrageurs from competing over these small crumbs, and instead they compete over bigger chunks of profit, and that leads to larger losses to LPs. Gas costs have a similar effect. To the extent that you can have a chain with lower gas costs, then there will be more frequent arbitrage, and that will actually translate into less losses due to arbitrage. So let me, so this is a problem. Let me talk about some of the mitigations. And these are a bunch of different directions that are both being explored in the research world and by practitioners in different protocols and so forth. So I've already talked about one. The idea of having faster blocks is something to mitigate arbitrage. We can talk about having what I'll call dynamic AMMs. These are AMMs that do maybe have more sophisticated trading strategies than just, let's say, constant function market maker or something like that. And then there's two different types of auction type solutions. They're what I'll call ex post auctions. And these are auctions for the right to extract MEV with the idea that we can sort of collect that money and redistribute it to the people who are suffering from the MEV and sort of inoculate the problem. However, these are options that are constructed during block generation. So auctions where you're bidding for the MEV, where you can kind of see, maybe see already what the possible MEV is. And then the second type of solution are what I'll call ex ante auctions. These are auctions for the right to extract MEV, which are conducted way in advance of block generation. So you may have some kind of auction where rather than auctioning off just the MEV in a single block, you're auctioning off looking at what's the MEV going to be over the next hour or the next day, and you might have some kind of auction to sort of to capture that MEV. Okay, so we talked about faster blocks a little bit. The idea is to reduce losses by making the arbitrages more frequent and smaller. So you can do this with things like shorter block times, or something like a first come first served transaction ordering is sort of effectively like kind of having a zero block time. So that's sort of the limit of that. Independent of these types of MEV benefits, it's also independently desirable to have faster block times. It's a better user experience for people using the blockchain. Of course, there are challenges here, and probably the foremost challenge is it's difficult to decentralize. It's not incentive compatible to ask proposers to minimize the block time, because as I just showed you a formula, their profits are super linear in the block time. So there's natural incentive to try and extend that as much as possible. And that's, for example, at the heart of this issue of multi-block MEV, where we talk about how proposers can potentially extract even more value if they control multiple blocks in a row, and therefore effectively increase the block time. Consensus is more difficult with short block times, and also short block times really create incentives for geographic centralization, because you don't want to maybe spend the time or latency for your packets to go around the world. So one sort of challenge is it's difficult to do this in a decentralized way. A second challenge is actually it doesn't eliminate all MEV. Right, so the model I showed, which is of course just a model, MEV goes to zero as the block time goes to zero. But my model assumes this sort of diffusion process, this geometric Brownian motion, where prices kind of move continually. And if you start moving into sort of very fine timescales, like timescales of let's say less than a second, you start to see that actually that's not really a good model for how financial market prices move. In fact, they jump also. And so even with instantaneous blocks, even with first come first serve, like you see in traditional markets like NASDAQ, there still exists this type of MEV. It doesn't fully go to zero because prices can jump. Right, so that's faster blocks. Next idea is this idea of dynamic AMMs. Right, so the idea here is let's improve the trading strategy. So at its heart, we can think of an AMM, or really any kind of market making, as making money from let's call them uninformed traders or noise traders. These are people who are trading for idiosyncratic reasons, and losing money to informational traders, to arbitrageurs, people who are trading because they have better information. And that's at the heart of adverse selection. You don't want to trade with these arbitrageurs because you're going to lose money. And so there's a whole host of ideas of thinking about how to change the algorithms, perhaps changing fees in various ways, or changing how liquidity is allocated, or so on. There's ideas of using extra off-chain information. Right, so for example, if you had really fast price oracles, maybe you could leverage price oracles to move your prices in a way where arbitrageurs wouldn't be able to exploit you. There's a number of projects exploring these different ideas. Of course, there's some challenges here. This is a vast and very difficult design space. Essentially, what we're looking for are optimal market-making algorithms. And as far as I'm aware in the financial literature, outside of very specialized settings, that is just not known. Right, so it's a very challenging problem, especially challenging if you're going to try to do everything in the restricted computational environment of a blockchain. And if you try to move things off-chain, that may be a centralizing vector. So that's the second class of solutions, dynamic AMMs. Third class of solutions, ex post auctions. The idea here is to auction off the right to extract MEV while the block is being generated. So this is nice because this is a very easy type of auction to participate in. If you have a bunch of arbitrageurs or searchers, they can, at the instant the block is about to be generated, they can see exactly what the state of the various AMMs on chain are. They can look at what are the prices on Binance, and it's very easy to sort of value what that MEV opportunity is worth, and then bid for it in the context of an auction. The challenges here, though, are that if you're trying to run this auction process at the same time scale as you're actually doing a consensus, you can't run these auctions on the blockchain itself. You need some type of additional off-chain infrastructure. So you either need like a centralized auctioneer, some type of MEV boost type of actor, or you need some sort of decentralized auction process that's going on in parallel with the block construction. Also, composability is very difficult here. It's sort of difficult if you're sort of putting in a trade to sort of reason about what's going to happen if the outcome is dependent on the result of of an auction process. And of course, all the auction solutions rely on the auctions being competitive, which they may not be. So a bunch of examples of ex post auctions. I'm going to highlight one idea which I think is particularly elegant from some of my colleagues at Paradigm. And the idea here is if you are in a blockchain where the proposer is guaranteeing that the transactions are ordered by priority taxes, you can actually leverage that mechanism itself to run an ex post auction without any additional infrastructure. And the idea is simply to leverage on that one priority fee auction, which the sequencer is promising to run anyway, and to use that in order to distribute MEV. So the core idea is you would say, for example, for every $1 of priority fees that a transaction pays to the sequencer, the AMM can see what priority fee the transaction is paying, and it will demand to charge the sender $99 in order to sort of process that trade. Now, looking at it from the perspective of, let's say, an arbitrageur, they care about the fees they pay. They don't care where it's going. Right? They don't care whether it goes to the proposer or sequencer or whether it goes to the application. So this is they will essentially bid the same total amount, but it'll just simply get redirected to the application rather than the underlying blockchain. And the application can do things like redistribute that MEV to the liquidity providers who are the ones who are suffering there. So very easy to implement. Maybe the main challenge here is it requires the block proposer to ensure that they're ordering the block in terms of the priority fee. It requires them to ensure that they're not going to censor and so on and so forth. And so far, we really don't know how to do that in a decentralized way. So if you have, for example, a centralized sequencer on an L2, this works really well. But for example, if you're on Ethereum mainnet, we don't know quite how to do this. I'm going to talk about one last class of solutions. These are what are called ex-ante auctions. Again, another type of auction. And the idea here, though, is rather than auctioning at the time a block is generated, let's auction things in advance. So I'm going to give one example in the interest of time of a design that I've proposed. The idea here is you're an automated market maker, but what we're going to do is we're going to have a special role, someone we're going to call a pool manager, manager, and that person is able to do two things. One is for the period of time that they're the pool manager, they're able to set the fee that is charged for swappers, and number two, they're able to keep the fees, so they collect all the fees. Now, in exchange for this, they will pay back in an auction. When they bid in the auction, they're going to anticipate collecting all these fees, so they will refund those fees to the liquidity provider. And here you can, if you sort of think about this a little bit, because the pool manager is both setting the fee and collecting the fee, they effectively have the ability to trade with no fee, whereas every other actor in the system has to pay fees to trade against the pool. So in this way, the pool manager kind of has priority in collecting arbitrage, because they can collect very, very small arbitrages that are less than the fee, while that is not profitable to everyone else. And again, they will realize this in advance, and so if they're in a competitive market, they will potentially refund this to the application, which can then distribute it back to the liquidity providers. The second sort of benefit for this is setting fees in an AMM is a very technically challenging problem, and here we're kind of outsourcing to a specialized, maybe highly sophisticated agent. So you can imagine maybe this would be someone like Citadel Securities, who has like a lot of expertise in how to set fees and bid-ask spreads and so on, and they would perhaps do this better than an on-chain protocol would do. And again, under the right kind of technical assumptions, especially assuming that there's a competitive market among these arbitrageurs, we're able to sort of demonstrate that such a system would provide more liquidity than traditional designs. So I think I'm a little bit over time, so I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Our one question.
Talia.
So there are mechanisms like prof that try prof, PROF,
Yes.
that try to subvert or mitigate MEV at the protocol level. How would you classify that?
So I think, so I forget the details of Prof. I did know them at one point, but it's a little bit. So I think that's one solution, but I think the key is you really want to do it at the application level. Because, for example, in these applications that I'm talking about, the person who's suffering loss from the MEV is the liquidity providers. So if you're able to sort of auction MEV and collect it at the protocol level, and maybe it goes to sequencers or validators or whatever, that you still have the welfare loss, because the losses are still being incurred by the liquidity providers. They provide less liquidity. There's still kind of less trading. So I forget the details of Prof exactly, but if it's a mechanism that refunds to the protocol, that's a little bit the wrong direction from my thinking.
We can talk about it offline.
Okay.
Can I continue and it still counts as one question?
Yeah.
So I forgot the stats, but I think a large percentage of transactions on Ethereum, at least, these days go through roll-up, Arbitrum or other things.
Right.
And I believe, so you tell me, how much MEV is present when the transaction fees are lowered, the transactions are not actually broadcast to the mempool, they're not visible, and they go through these roll-ups. De facto, in practice, isn't MEV sort of solved?
So if you're willing to, I think they solve it in a couple of directions. They have faster blocks. You can do things like you can guarantee priority ordering, so you can implement types of auctions that I've discussed. So I think, but even roll-ups there have challenges. So for example, roll-ups can have a significant spam problem because of actors who are trying to sort of exploit MEV and so on. So you see proposals like the Arbitrum Time Boost proposal. That's all about trying to mitigate MEV because you had an enormous sort of spam problem from these types of agents. So I'm not 100% sure it's solved in rollups. I do think it's easier to solve in rollups because of the fact that the sequencer is centralized. So that means both that you can do things like priority ordering. It also means that other types of MEV, which I didn't talk about, like things like sandwiching, can't happen because there's not a public mempool. But this type of MEV still exists on rollups. All right, thanks.